Okay, I'm gonna call to order the Lenox Public Schools School Committee meeting of January 10th, 2022. And this meeting will include remote participation via Zoom. And if we have any votes, which I don't believe we do, but if we have any votes, they'll need to be roll call because we have a member who's zooming into the meeting.
For minutes, and I think it just takes me a minute.
I'm sorry?
I said that you'll need to approve the minutes by vote.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I got kicked off, so I might just stay here, if that's okay.
Okay, so first order of business is public comments. And I don't see any hands raised. So no public comment. I don't have any correspondence. So we'll move on to the school committee meeting minutes of December 13, 2021.
Approve the minutes of December 13, 2021.
So second. Is there any discussion, editing, suggestions, changes? Hearing none, we'll call for a roll call vote. Laura? Aye.
Bob Munch, aye.
Megan Kirby, aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye.
Veronica Fenton, aye.
David?
David Rimler, aye.
It's a vote. Okay, I don't have anything for new business. So we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Hopefully everyone can hear me through my mask. I know in the past we're asked to pull our masks down when we speak. If we get any feedback that needs to happen, then we'll try to do that. Otherwise, I'll try to use my teacher voice and project. So superintendent's report, we're going to start with highlights and recognitions, and I'm sharing my screen so that you can follow along at home as I share here. So there's 3 recognitions tonight. The first one is for a LMMHS student, Lily Schnapp, who's been approved for a paid internship to work with students at Morris Elementary School. So we have a high school student who'll be going down to work with Morris students as part of a grow your own program that DESE has put into place to try to build a pipeline for future educators and also trying to fill some of the shortages that are happening around the state in terms of having folks available to work with students. So we're really excited about this, and congratulations to Lily for applying and being accepted into the program. I think it's great we get to see our older students mentor our younger students, and then also get an internship for a future educator as well. So to win all the way around.
Now, was Lily, what year would she be?
Senior.
Senior?
And then our second recognition is for Grace Elliott, another student from LMHS. And she has recently been selected as a College Board National Recognition recipient for the National Rural and Small Town Recognition Award. And that's an award that's given out for a combination of PSAT scores and or AP scores. So congratulations to Grace. It's a big honor that she's been nominated by the College Board for, or recognized by the College Board for this award. And then we move on to a list of early college acceptances. So when you apply to college, there's a period called early enrollment or early acceptance. And so if folks want to apply in the fall, they can try to do that and get early acceptance rather than waiting until the second round of acceptance go out around springtime. So we have a number of students who've been accepted into a variety of colleges from just about every corner of the country and varying levels of and types of universities. So we're very excited. We had students accepted to Arizona State, Assumption, Beloit College, Boston College, Bowdoin, Brown, Clemson, College of Charleston, the Colorado School of Mines, Cornell, Eastern Kentucky, Eckerd, Emerson, Emmanuel, Fairfield, MCLA, Merrimack College, Middlebury College, Penn State, Providence College, Rollins College, Salve Regina, Siena, St. Anselm's, St. Olaf, Temple, the University of Arizona, UMass Amherst, Union College, University of Chicago, University of Denver, the University of Hartford, University of Miami, University of Vermont, Vassar, Wentworth Institute of Technology, Western New England, Westfield State, Williams, and Yale. So really impressive list. And so our students have really persevered during this COVID time, rose to the occasion, and continue to work hard in the classroom, work hard in the sports fields, give back to their community. And I think that these 40 universities recognize that. And so we're really proud to say that we have students on their way to these universities and colleges.
In some cases, where a student has been accepted to more than one, or is this 40 different students?
So in some cases, a student may have been to one, but typically we do early acceptance, you're only applying to one school. So it's in some ways a little bit more of a risk, they would say, because you're kind of putting your eggs in that basket. But again, it's a wonderful opportunity, and I think it shows, you know, the quality of the product we're putting out as a school district to see that list. So I was really excited when I saw that share with us from our guidance counselors.
Well, they weren't rushing around to do those, January 1st deadlines, I guess.
No, but they were rushing around to do like, whatever it is, November deadlines or October is that what it is, so.
But they won't be waiting around in April for a decision.
No.
Wow.
But I know that we want to do a couple of projects with kids, and they said, I can't do it right now because I'm so, overburdened with applications, so. But, and again, it's very ambitious to be out there and go be an early applicant too. Like that's, again, I think something that's a testament to our kids to show, the type of students that we have, that they have that confidence to go and do that. So the next thing on the superintendent's report is a return to school update. And so I want to share some of the updates about our experience returning to school. It was a highly anticipated return based on some of the news reports that you may have read about COVID. And so just want to give an update on some of the key features. One of the things we did before we even reopened school is we were able to work with DESE to secure PPE for our teachers. So we had deliveries of KN95 masks and also rapid test kits for teachers to test at home and to have gear when they came back to school to help try to mitigate the spread of COVID. We had about 75 teachers show up on a weekend to pick up those tests. And so again, thank you to Melissa and to many of our other volunteers who drove out to Pittsfield to get the supplies and all of those helped to coordinate with the distribution. It's kind of a last minute effort. And so, DESE was really scrambling, and then as a result, we were really scrambling, but I think we came through, and I was happy that we were able to get those products out to our folks. DESE has extended the mask mandate. This is kind of breaking news that happened today through February 28th of 2022. Again, any school that reaches the 80% threshold of vaccinated students and staff may apply to reduce the or lift the mask mandate if they choose to do so. So in our last one of our last communications to families, we had put out there, we wanted to do a survey so we can get some feedback around what our counts are, so that in the future, if we want to go in that direction, we have the data to make those decisions. And that's in our world, something that goes through our Joint Labor Management Committee, JLMC. And so we'll be sharing that data and information to continue talks about our ongoing efforts to stop the spread of COVID and also keep students in school learning safely. So we'll be gathering that information and talking about that as in the weeks to come.
On that note, it seems to me that Boston Globe the other day ran a chart showing all the article was mainly about the disparities in the cities and suburbs in terms of percent of 5 to 12-year-olds who were getting, or 5 to 11, whatever the age was. And it seems to me that Lenox was in the 60 to 70% range. I can bring the exact numbers out, but so I'm wondering if if, if it's likely to get to 80, or obviously people can still continue to get vaccinated, but I don't know if that number is just plateaued or we've seen more people adding to it.
So I think for us, especially at the elementary level, we had students that were continually getting vaccinated. One of the things that kind of throw a wrench in it for us and for many folks around the state right now is that there are some students who did get COVID in between the first and second administration. And so now we have to wait until they're clear to get the second dose and complete the window. But we had nearly 80% at the high school virtually all year between our students and faculty that have been vaccinated. So there we have it. Overall, we may not. So, and it's by school community. So it's not something that has to be a one-shot deal for the entire district. We could have different rules for different schools, but even at the at LMMHS, it was the middle school at the beginning that we were kind of waiting for students to become eligible and they get those tests. And so sometimes we had to just wait for students' birthdays until they're in the right age group. Now they expanded it. That makes it much easier at that secondary level, the middle school or vaccinated. So some of it was just a little bit of a timing issue. But I think, again, we want to continue to underscore the message that people get vaccinated. It's probably that masking the number 1 and 2 most effective strategies for mitigating COVID or reducing the severity of COVID. And so we want to continue to do that. And then that would be what it would take to get us to that 80%. So I've shared a couple of graphs. These are reports for our staff absences coming off of the break. Again, we read stories about outbreaks in some communities were hit extremely hard, including some of our neighbors. But I would say that overall our numbers, while we saw some uptick in case counts and in absences, I think we fared pretty well compared to superintendents I talked to from across the state and had very different realities. So our absences for our staff coming back at Morris ranged from a low of 2.5 of our employees that were out on January 4th to 9 that were out on January 6th. And some of those are folks who do have COVID and are in the isolation period. Others are not. So, we'll have to do, if we want to take more detailed breakout, we'll have to run this a little bit differently. But we just want to see the trend overall to kind of keep an eye on that moving target. LMMHS, we can see that there's been an increase in staff absences over time. Again, some of that is COVID related, but then other cases are just folks that have had other appointments and things or family things that come up. But and then the other side, sometimes that we run into is that we have faculty and staff that do need to take time to care for someone that has COVID. And so we're also working on putting together an agreement with the teachers union to allow teachers to teach from home if they're forced to quarantine, and also allow students to work remotely if they're forced to quarantine, to try to preserve learning as we move through this period here. This last graph here shows the total absences for all of our employees. And again, the last couple of days here in school, we've had our highest numbers ranging from 15 to 17 folks that were out. Luckily, we've been able to get through this period because we have a surplus of substitutes, not surplus, we have a greater number of substitutes than we typically would have because we have students who are college age students who are home on break. So if you know college students and they want to earn a little bit of extra money, give back to the community, they can certainly reach out and sign up to become substitutes for us. They're always welcome. Look at our student absences. At Morris, we've been running at around 42. And so we sent out a message again, sharing some of our data and our information to let folks know that schools aren't the place where COVID has really been transmitted in our experience, but it's the breaks in the school calendar that tend to be the most problematic in return from those. We saw that after Halloween, we saw that after Thanksgiving, and we saw that again after this winter break. So, we know that when we're in school and we're following our mitigation strategies, we have a very good track record of keeping the spread of COVID contained. LMMHS actually, now, let's be careful looking at these side by side, because the numbers at LMMHS are higher. But the trend is slightly different. We had an uptick on Friday, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that if you're a high school student on a Friday, we can have a long weekend. That may have been something that's a little bit more attractive to folks to say, we'll take a day out of school that day. But that day, taken out of the mix, we again are running at around 60% or 60 students or so at LMHS that have been absent. So both schools were running at around an 80 to 85% attendance rate. That's a little bit low for us, but again, much better than other partners around the state that have had to actually close schools due to either high numbers of student or staff absences. So I think overall we're pretty pleased with that. Here's our total numbers together, the aggregate amount of students from both schools combined. With the high again that Friday of 131, largely driven by the absenteeism at LMHS that day. And again, that's why we put out the message to underscore the importance of coming to school. Again, we know that it's good for students' mental health, and it's obviously the best way to further their learning, but also keep them from being in the spread of COVID. So we want to continue to message the importance of coming to school. And the last charts here look at our overall COVID cases. And so again, while we have read some stories about pretty significant outbreaks around the country, around the region, around the state, we haven't really experienced that to the greatest degree. Now, there's some eye-popping numbers on January 3rd, but that's really because we're looking at a 2-week period bundled together there. So it's a little bit of a selection bias they're looking at. We see that number there. But and then Morris, we're running at around 1 total case a day. Today we had our highest. We had 4 students, and we had 1 staff member, which, if you think about the trends, that's kind of what we expected to see, that it would probably be the second week that we would see more cases than the first because of the incubation period and the potential date of contact, especially if folks were gathering after the Christmas holiday, maybe closer to New Year's. At LMMHS, we had that initial high spike coming out of that 2-week period, and then during the week, we've been running at about 6 students and 1 staff member here or there. So again, I think overall our numbers have been very encouraging. I know that I was expecting a possibility of this getting much worse, so I was pretty relieved to see what our reality looks like. And I think to really put this into context is this last graph here that shows the overall numbers for the district. So you saw some of the information we put out around pool testing and the percentage rates. I'm going to send out an update or a correction. We did find 1 staff member that was identified through the follow-up testing. So we had 2 instead of the 1 that was reported initially. But even with that, I mean, I think our cases still look much more rosy than many other folks around the area. And I think we're doing a decent job of containing COVID once we're here in school and using our resources to do that. So that's a quick report on our reopening and our return to school. We do not at this time have any capacity limits imposed on us by either DESE or the MIAA for sports. So sports are continuing to take place. We are closing tomorrow for a severely cold day. It's highly unusual to have to close. Sometimes we can do a delay and it warms up a little bit, but temperatures are just not forecasted to recover tomorrow. And so when we're looking at -15 to -25, that's pretty significant. So, but we will have after-school basketball for kids at Morris or in that program. Also, the basketball game tomorrow night in Greylock is still on because these aren't closures due to snow. So it's not that it's unsafe to drive or that type of thing. But it's more that it was a cold-related closure. So some of the things that typically might be canceled on a snow day can still go on. So that's a brief update on the return and reopening. And we can sort of take any questions if folks have them, comments.
I have a question.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but do you have a sense on these student absent numbers, how they compare this year to, say, what the average typical students out would be in a preceding the pandemic? Like how
Yeah,
do these numbers compare to prior to the pandemic?
They're higher. So typically we're running at like a 95 to 98% attendance rate. Sometimes might get to like 92, but to be down at like 80 and 85 is higher than what we typically tend to see. So we are seeing lower overall attendance as a result of the pandemic. Now it's a twofold thing, right? So part of that is students who have to stay home because they are COVID positive. The other thing, and this is the one that we really tried to, I think, address in the letter that went home, is what I would say maybe like COVID reticence. We have some families that are afraid to send their kids to school because they're afraid they're going to be exposed at school. And while I understand that, it seems to make logical sense. When you look at the data that we've seen all school year when we're open, that has not been our experience. Our experience always is after a break, we see an uptick. So that tells us that the exposures are happening outside of school, not in school. And so we're really trying to drive home that narrative that being in school is a safe place to be. We have the data to support that locally, but also I share some data from an epidemiologist from Harvard Medical School, who also has found the same thing in her 2 years of research as well. So to answer your question, yes, our absenteeism is up, and it's definitely not the norm that we would see in typical years.
Yeah, and then when looking at, say, the student absences on the various schools due to COVID, would you expect then a fluctuation as kids come off the 5-day quarantine period, and then we'll see either a kind of an aging or a transition of kids back in, depending upon whether we have kids who hopefully don't get sick in the future.
Yeah, we'll definitely see that, right? I'm going to see quite a bit of variation because that 5-day period is so short. We'll see these like rising and falling spikes as people are in that 5-day window. Hopefully, and that will drive part of the numbers. But again, the number of positive cases in relation to the overall absences is actually pretty low. So the majority of folks that are not coming to school right now, it's folks who are not here for other reasons. Maybe their kids are sick. We definitely want sick children to stay home. We don't want you sending your kids in school if they're sick. But there is another group that we do hear of, and it's anecdotal, but I do believe that there is some truth to it. And that's that there are people who are afraid to send their students into school because they're afraid that they're going to be exposed to COVID in the schools. And so, that tends to still be the biggest group of students who are not coming to school in this reopening period.
Hey, Mark, what about the sort of, I guess there's an in-between category of people who are sort of, it could be after the 5 days, but feel like there's sort of a 5 to 10 day window. There could be people who feel like they've been in close contact. Is Lenox policy on things like that sort of, if you don't have COVID and you're not in that 5-day window, then you can and should come to school, or what's the guidance for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually it. And I think that over time, it's become a little bit more clear and a little easier. I know like in the past we had these very elegant, flow charts and testing and things, and it was a lot more complicated to, I think, get through those. And I think now it is a lot more clear, especially when they put this 5-day guidance. So if you're a positive case, then yes, you should stay up for the 5 days. If not, you should be in school, again, as long as you're vaccinated. Now, there is a different standard for those who are not vaccinated. So that's also could be part of the who we're seeing represented in these figures too, because they'll be forced to quarantine for a longer period And I think that's possibly, I think, a policy lever to try to incentivize vaccines. So I think there's some intentionality behind that, but that would be the other, only, one-off would be that.
And then just one other question, I think your point about most of the student absence isn't actually explained by the positives here. It seems like there's almost the exact same ratio on the staff side of positives to absences, especially at LMHS, I think it's sort of going 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, whereas there's only 2 positives over the course of the period. Is that, I'm assuming that's not COVID avoidance, is that, I'm just curious if you have a sense of what's driving high level of absences, especially at a time when it's clear that the schools really need everybody who can be there if it's not COVID.
Yeah, and it's easy, I think, when you look at some of our numbers too, for it to look wildly large, and they are. You gotta remember, again, our overall numbers are pretty low. And so of these staff absences, yes, there's gonna be some relationship to positive COVID cases, but to your point, we don't have lots of staff positive cases at LMHS. Now, some could be in those windows, but other than that, it's a little bit of everything. And so it's folks who are out sick for other reasons. Some of it could literally be COVID avoidance. But when people turn in their reasons for being out, they're not writing down or saying they COVID. So, as far as we know, they're legitimate requests, and or, some of them would be also to care for others who have to quarantine or are COVID positive, whether that's a child or a parent or a family member.
Mark,
Yes.
and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting anyone. It's hard to tell on this end who's breaking and who's done speaking and when the natural break is. Just a quick question. I just want to get back to student absences for a second because I was looking at that compared to like the LMHS with the COVID numbers specifically. And I'm looking at that, and this kind of ties back into the point I had before. When I look at this, I see 27 plus another 13, 14. Like, is that what's accounting, the 27 plus 14? Like, how much of this is additive across the board? And that kind of dovetails into who's coming off their COVID. So when I see the total student absences, when I look at 61, do I back out 27? When I look at 41, do I take 27 plus 6? And then I add another 7 for the next day? You see what I mean?
I think that's one way of doing it, but it's very difficult to do because it depends on when these exposures happen and where they are in that window, right? So, and Amy has been tracking that, and so we do have those numbers as well. But again, they're very tough to, easily model because of the fact that they're just all over the place and it does change. And some of it started already in the break and they were already in the tail end of it on, others are just starting it on the January 3rd date. So, but if you want to take, a closer look at that, I can shoot you over the other numbers we have of the actual numbers of COVID cases that are active, and that you can look at that.
I mean, only if you feel if it's relevant to the discussion. Otherwise, that's not necessary for me.
That number would be dramatically lower than
Yes,
what we're seeing for absences. It would be
absolutely. And that's why, again, I felt compelled to
Likely
reach
below 10.
out with the letter to families to underscore the safety of being in schools and the importance of getting students into schools, because the number of positive cases is a tiny fraction of the overall absences that we're seeing there. And so we want our kids, to be in the buildings. Again, as long as they're healthy. If they're sick, with other things, the cold, the flu, whooping cough, what have you, we certainly don't want to send kids in, right? And again, it's funny until it's not, right? And then we've had these great outbreaks of all these things and more. So again, if kids are healthy, if we want them in school, so long as they're not forced to quarantine. And if they're sick, keep them home. That's what the nurses have repeatedly been trying to stress the parents as well. Keep sick kids home, send healthy kids in.
Thank you for the good charts.
Thank you.
They're
Great.
very handy.
And also, thank you for those of you here on the committee and also those at home who volunteered to help out with our follow-up testing. You come in and you have a large number of positive pools. The follow-up testing is a Herculean task, and so we had some folks electively volunteer to do that. It's training and learn how to. Again, it's not hard to do, but we have to make sure we're doing it consistently so we get the best results. And so again, thank you to all those folks. And if we need to continue to do that, we'll continue to look for those volunteers. But I know that in both schools that went really well, and the nurses were very appreciative to have the extra sets of hands. We also do have substitute nurses coming in to help as well. It's hard for one nurse to be working with the folks who have to, put in their 15 minutes and then also then handle other things that come in the office. So, I was in a positive pool after the break, so I got to really see the firsthand what this looks like. So,
many times.
yes, right. But all in all, I mean, the process worked, and I've been very happy with how tightly organized it was and how well run it was. So again, kudos to our nurses as well. All right, the next item on the superintendent's report is two things from Melissa. And so I'm going to turn this screen sharing over to her in a moment. And so she's going to share a update on our capital plans for upcoming years, and then also a quick update on the budget. Again, I've been asking her at all these meetings to give an update of the budget so that we're keeping the public and apprised of where we are in the budget process and trying to, again, maximize transparency all the way through. So Melissa, I'm going to stop sharing and you can start sharing your screen whenever you're ready.
So part of the budget preparation for the upcoming years is the capital budget. We have the operating budget, which is what the funding that is used to operate the school system. The capital budget is for items outside of that area that require additional funding for projects, building projects, things of that nature. So we always develop, as well as the operating and capital budget.
And just to be clear again, for those who are not school finance experts, the operating budget is things that pay teachers' salaries, to buy books and supplies, copying paper, subscriptions for software packages, those types of things. So that's our operating budget. The capital is building projects and any sort of durable equipment that's going to last us a number of years, right? So we kind of break it out to those two big buckets, so to speak.
Thank you. So I thought I'd break it out to 2023 and future projects and break it out by school. So Morris Elementary School was built in 1960. The square footage is 56,000. And we have 4 maintenance personnel that work daily out of that building. There is a sub that does come in and has been coming in over the last year and a half. He's a retired custodian who is doing some work due to COVID, writing down and helping out with what needs to be done during the day when the students are there. So these projects are listed in order of importance and knowing that we will have the funding to get it done. The town has said 370,000 is usually our capital appropriation, and as long as that they can help that, aside from say a pandemic or something like that, we will receive those funding. So that's what I'm basing the years on. So in speaking with the principal and the head custodian at each building, we've come up with some important items that need to be addressed in the next year. The backup boiler at Morris is 26 years old and parts are no longer available. The main boiler, if that ever is inoperable, the backup boiler is what heats the building. So we need to have a backup boiler that works. And in fact, in 2009, the main boiler did go down for, I think, 47 days. So the backup boiler worked like a charm. But now it's older and parts are no longer available. It's a natural gas system. So we are looking to replace that, and the estimated cost is $50,000. Morris also has a tractor similar to the high school, but their tractor is much, much smaller. It's more of like a residential grade tractor that they're using now. And it's used for snow removal and some grounds maintenance. It's 13 years old. It has a small motor. The compression is low on the engine, and they are looking to trade that in to get more of a tractor more on the equivalent of what LMMHS has, which is more of a commercial grade type tractor. And that estimated cost is $25,000. That will be purchased utilizing the state contract. And Pittsfield Lawn and Tractor typically is the vendor that we use, and they are on the state contract, so it's easy to purchase locally. And we talk about lighting upgrades. That is still on our list. We are a great community in Lenox, and we do receive grant money for this. And I will be talking with Chris Ketchum, the town manager, town administrator, to see where we are with the current cycle of the Green Communities grant, because we do want to include changing out the current style light bulbs to LED in the west wing of Morris, as well as some areas of LMMHS. And so that estimated cost from the grant hopefully is $20,000.
So that would be, if we got the grant, this would still be our portion. We have to pay, or would the grant cover?
The grant, this is the grant portion that is covered. Now, when I met with the representative, there was no mention of a portion that we would have to cover. So I can clarify that, but this was the portion that they said that they would cover.
So the cost is listed for how much it costs, but assuming we get the grant monies, we wouldn't actually pay that.
Right.
Sometimes I have to rephrase it.
Yes, and
Yeah,
that's why the funding
That's what I was
says
getting at.
Green Communities. We want them to fund it. They
Thank
need
you.
to fund it.
What's on the tractor? Does the staff do lawn maintenance? And
They do
that's
some
where
lawn
that comes from.
maintenance. Morris has the field in the back, and I do believe that they do take care of that. I know at the high school they do. But at Morris, there's only one daytime custodian. The head custodian is the only one there. So I'm not sure if the evening custodians do it. I know that he doesn't always have the time to do the maintenance during the school day, but in the summer they do. LMMHS. So the year built was 1966, square footage 117,000. We have 5.5 maintenance personnel there. And sometimes the sub custodian at Morris will travel over to LMHS if they need help. So he goes back and forth between some of the buildings. So at some points they may have a little bit more than the 5.5. Some of the more important projects, the gymnasium wall repair. There's a wall in the gymnasium that is peeling, and there's pieces on the ground that from the wall that they need to pick up every day before the gym can be used. So that has to be repaired, repainted, and resealed. An estimated cost, and it is truly an estimated cost, is about $50,000. So that's why there's a to be determined there. I think when we have somebody come and look at it and give us an estimate, and maybe a little bit higher, but that's where we are right now. The front door entry upgrade is to secure the area and to limit access to visitors, so that they're pointed to the office, so that we know who's in the building. They can come in, they can be buzzed in, but they go to the office versus down the hallway and not to be seen again until they're in the cafeteria or something like that. So that is estimated to be about $45,000, and that would piggyback on the security and safety that we're working on this year with the key fobs. and door entry through key fobs. And again, here's a lighting upgrade for LMHS. The Dunham Theater is looking to replace much of their lighting, and other areas of the building they're looking to also install LED. There's a few classrooms with them, and the teachers and the staff and students have gotten used to LED lighting. It does take a little bit to get used to it, but there's no complaints now at this point, so I think we can move forward. And district-wide, so there's a few items on here. We are looking to hire a 0.50 facilities director. And we feel that this is necessary because we are not proactive in our building maintenance. We are very reactive. When something happens, we fix it. The facilities director would help to coordinate the projects, be sort of boots on the ground while they're going on, and would also assist the district in becoming proactive and helping develop a maintenance plan and help the staff to adhere to the long-term plan and vision.
And give us someone to prioritize the needs between two different buildings, right? So right now, we kind of just have a head custodian at each. They do a great job, but neither one of them is truly a facilities manager. And so then there's no real mechanism for them to determine whose needs are more important and or to, start to look strategically at these projects across years. And so we're really looking for someone to kind of fill that gap. And then also, it seems that sometimes right now, one of the things that we're finding is that something gets lost sometimes between the buildings and the communication up to the central administration. And so there's years of deferred maintenance or incomplete projects that we want to really close that loop and have somebody working on that so that things get done right, they get done first time. We have someone to oversee it.
And the right person in that position will save the district.
So can I ask, what's the obvious question? So we have this capital appropriation that's typically its salary. So in the first year it's capital, and then it would be, because we'd be considering the person to be an ongoing, correct? So
Yes, we would consider it to be ongoing, and the reason that it's listed under capital is because they be managing the capital projects. So you can break up the salary to fall under the capital
I see.
appropriation because
see.
of that.
Okay, thank you.
So a while back, we talked about doing job, position shares with other districts. And facilities director is one who used to come up occasionally. I don't know if anybody's survived any of those conversations.
We haven't, we can certainly take a look at that. I'm not sure if our neighboring districts would have the capacity, but we can certainly look into that. Again, it's an idea that we also then should look at, instead of sharing with another town, sharing with our own town, saying, we do have this collective portfolio of buildings across Lenox, and so maybe this would be something that the town would want to split with the schools, so we would be able to have one person that's kind of, again, doing that strategic thinking and planning and project management for all of our buildings across town. So it's an evolving conversation, but I can certainly reach out to the neighboring districts and see if there's any desire to team up.
That second concept of the shared, my brain was going there as I was listening and thinking, was about, how does this interface with these are town buildings, and we have people within the town, I don't know who's doing what these days, and the building does a lot of work, and others in looking at all the different facilities and all the different buildings we have in town, and how do they interface, and how are we doing this kind of work. So I was thinking about that. And then the other thought was, does this person also assist with the building long-term building planning committees? Which seems to me in a lot of ways, from having had discussions in the past about buildings, and we had Don Fitzgerald for a long time on our committee, and that's sort of his expertise, not sort of, that is his expertise. And it's just so helpful having people that really know that, but also understand how the buildings funding processing works from DESI and from MassGov. So I think that there's a lot of layers to that as to how that works, because it's not just a building inspector or an engineer, it's more about how does that whole process work, so. If such a person existed, it'd be great to have somebody who has or gains expertise in that area, because it feels like that's a little bit, you know, re-educating myself on how, on what to do and when and how.
Yeah, and this is gonna be one of the asks, you know, in the budget this year, you know, and it's, as I'm sitting here doing through my energy planning and studying the district, this is one that just has stuck out to me and kind of wanted to share it tonight as part of this, but this will be an evolving conversation, but you know, in my opinion, that we're going to make an investment here that's gonna save us lots of money in deferred maintenance, could save us something to the order of, you know, hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars by staying on top of all of the ongoing maintenance needs at our schools. And also, you know, it would be someone that would also be in charge of the maintenance department. So we don't really have, we have a head custodian in each school, but we don't really have anyone who's in charge of maintenance per se. So they kind of report to Melissa. But this would give us someone who's dedicated to that and working with those folks. And that could help us in many ways, but making sure that we're scheduling strategically and that we're utilizing our resources, that we're purchasing in a uniform fashion to save money. Each building does their own procurement, so there's a lot of different, I think, areas for us to eke out quite a bit more efficiency with someone to.
Additionally, technology device renewal cycle, we want to begin that. We did make a lot of headway this past year with purchasing capital, utilizing the ESSER grant money for remote learning. Devices, I mean, for remote learning. So we did make a lot of headway, and this is to continue the cycle. This would be, I believe it's grades K through 2, replacement Chromebooks. And the E-rate program is on your cell phone bills, everybody pays an FCC tax. We get a portion of that. Municipalities, schools, libraries, we all get a little piece of that, and there's funding every year. So the Chromebooks are just the right price where they're 100% funded by E-rate. So you do still have to apply, you do still have to go through their bidding and their procurement process, but typically with technology devices, we do see 100% approval, and companies bid on this because it's guaranteed payment. And so the K through 2 cycle would be about 30 to 35,000. And again, that would be totally from the E-rate program. Infrastructure.
Sorry, one question, is the device, at this point, do we essentially have a Chromebook for every student? What is the sort of total scale of devices we're trying to obtain?
I believe that we do. And
is that something we wouldn't have had that before COVID, would we?
no, we did not.
We had a lot of Chromebook cards, but maybe not each kid, those were cards to be used in classrooms.
Right. I guess I'm just wondering, sort of steady state as we plan for a world where we don't need to support everybody, especially being remote, is a Chromebook for every student the right? We actually need that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, you know, across the state, across the country, that you see most schools are at least 1-to-1. Some even have more than that because they have other types of devices in school in addition to Chromebooks. The Chromebooks are relatively inexpensive. They're one that, you know, if they get lost or broken, it's not something that we're, you know, sending out laptops that cost thousands of dollars. And it's something that, again, when used well in instruction, helps to enhance and transform instruction. If it's something that's just replacing what we can do with pen and paper, then there's no need to do it. But we want to be able to really harness the capabilities of using these to go beyond what we normally could do with, you know, just books and pen and paper. So that's the strategic use of them. And getting on this replacement cycle will also keep us from having to kind of wait until we're at the end of the serviceable life of things and then have to buy lots of them all at one shot. So we want to try to smooth that out by having a continuing ongoing replacement cycle. So this will be the beginning of that.
Is this just Chromebook or is this other?
Just Chromebook in that, yes.
And if this
So
you
they
said
have-
was K2, is that basically suggests kind of a 4-year cycle.
Yeah, the ones that those students are using right now are at the end of their life cycle. And so we want to take them out of use at the end of this year and replace them.
Yeah, and in a perfect world, I mean, we would like to have as many students on Chromebooks as possible too, because it gives us, on the instructional side, the assurance that we know what's on the device, so program-wise, we know what they're able to do with it. It also allows us much higher degree of network security because we're using our products, and so we also we can remotely image those and we can control those and wipe them and those sorts of things. You know, and then also, you know, from an equity stance, everyone has to come to the same thing. Now, there'll be times in certain courses where you might need something that has a little bit more technological horsepower, right? So like maybe doing graphic design work or something like that. So we would still have, you know, some need to buy Macs and those types of things, or, you know, certain things we need an iPad or something like that. But we want basically like our day in and day out product to be the Chromebook. To the fact, again, like you said, that they're user friendly, they're relatively inexpensive, they're very fast too. So like push on and they're on. So and then everything's stored in the cloud, so we don't have issues with memory loss.
And continuing along technology, there are infrastructure upgrades that are a priority at this point, and we need to focus on them in the next couple of years. So we are looking to replace access points, which allows for wireless access across our buildings, and switches, which are really the communications devices that allow everyone to talk to each other, including our phones and things like that. So that's what, there's two phases. It's actually double the capital appropriation there almost. So we have this first year and then the second year, and we will receive E-rate reimbursement, E-rate funding for a portion of it. It's we're eligible for 123,000 E-rate over a 5-year period. It's based upon your number of students and the dollar amount, 169 per student. So, but we only receive 60% of that, so therefore it's 73,000 that we would receive from E-rate, and then the capital would put in the balance. Now that's also an estimate, could be lower, could be a little bit higher, but I'd rather err on the side of being conservative with the cost, so that we're not surprised when they do come in a little bit higher. So the summary for next year is Morris about 75,000, just 95 in district-wide, 186, and the bulk of that is the technology improvements. Green Communities grants, we're looking hopefully at 50,000, and the E-rate program will be 73,000 plus the 33,000 for the Chromebooks that's left off of there.
So, sorry, Melissa, what I was missing up there is things with direct student or faculty impact, like things we talked about in the past, like lab spaces, improved labs,
Yeah, the
locker
reason,
rooms.
you'll see that in the next slide for future capital, and it's because we have the building committee now that's been formed, and a lot of things are being discussed, but we don't know which way we're going. So you'll see that on these slides.
Is there anything that 356 that could be ESSER money, or is that all?
I'm sure that there could be some that could be moved over to ESSER, and I will, like we talked about in the finance, I will always look at that to see what we can move over. Morris Elementary, this is future, a roof replacement and playground equipment. I think we're probably going to look at it in the 2024 year. And that's for grades 1 through 5, and we're estimating about 75,000 for replacing that. Roofs are about, for a school, if it's a flat roof, it's about $20, I think would be a good estimate per square foot. When I was at Central Berkshire, there was a roof put on Craneville, which is a little bit bigger than Morris, and that cost $900,000. So that was $14 per square foot, 15, but that was quite a few years ago. So guessing based upon inflation, and I think between 20 and 30 is a good cost per square foot for roofs these days, which is expensive. So that would have to be a bond, and MSBA is still doing roofs and boilers, so we might be able to get into their, I always forget the name of their program. It's a quick program. It's, you apply and within months you're doing the work. It's not like they're full boat accelerated with that. So that program is a quick program. We would look at MSBA involvement there too.
But we may not be able to touch that for 2 or 3 years.
Yes,
based on
that's why it's, I did not want to put a year on it because it's a big project. And we know that we need to address it at some point in the future. And the same with LMHS. Here's some of the things that you were talking about. The roof replacement there, parking lot paving, science lab renovations, locker room renovations, the outer walls of the older part of the building really do need to be resealed to prevent events that may occur with wind, and hallway locker replacement was on the request from the principal and the head custodian as well. So in district-wide, we're continuing with the facilities director at point 5, the device renewal cycle, which would be the Chromebooks, E-rate and capital appropriation, and the technology infrastructure year 2, which is again the same, but maybe we do one building 1 year and the other building the next. So that capital appropriation is there. We would not get E-rate funding for that unless it was after 5 years from the first funding. So it's on there as potential depending on when we do it. Any questions?
Well, I'm wondering, when you showed the high school stuff, there are smaller projects, probably costly, but smaller projects like bathroom upgrades, things like that, we've talked about at the school building committee, but obviously we don't know what direction we're gonna go or what other things that might happen. But I think we had hoped that there were some science, whether we renovate the science rooms or not, there's some things that we found we're gonna try to go ahead with.
Yeah, there's a request to replace one of the sinks in one of the rooms. There's the ventilation hoods that can be done as well. And those are in this year. We're looking at that. It may not happen until the summer, but we have the capital funding to be able to do some of that.
Yeah.
Carpeting in the main office and guidance. Morris is looking to replace tiles and carpeting. So those things that really make a big impact are going to be done. And I think we can easily do it with 22 money.
One other question I have, Melissa, and the committee also is, we talked about the Morris playground at some point needing a refreshment, right? I've been involved in a couple different playground renewal projects, and I've gotten funds from different places. So I wrote a grant to Lowe's, and they gave us money to build a handicap accessible playground.
Yes.
We did a capital fundraising campaign where over a few years, parents, and community members pitched in with us in a variety of fundraising events to raise money to build. Have those types of things been part of efforts in Lenox in the past to offset costs for things like playgrounds? And it seems to me that that's something people probably get behind.
And they might, and if I can address, because we did a big one early on when that was never sort of new to town, it was 25 years ago, but one of which was the community center. And so that was a big, we were fortunate with GE, had a big project, and so they came and we had funding from them, we had community fundraising. And then there's another part of that, because there was some excess funds, because we had a great response because of GE's help. And we did of the park, it's known as Orbit, which is a little bit more for smaller children. It has a fence in that's where we do Little League and more like the coaches pitches. It's one of the ones that are walked to town. So, I mean, right, and then there's another one in Lenox, Tillotson, and that has a baseball park, et cetera. So each of those parks have been done through community efforts that have been local fundraising efforts, and some business partnerships as well as town funds. I think there was different management in place for the town too, and there's a different approach to, the cycle of it was sort of like, there didn't seem to have been a plan to upgrade those, so that we had a great community effort to do that. And I feel like similar responses would happen, and I think at the time that these other spaces were looked to be renovated, and since then, they're just really used all the time at the community and visitors, and people say, where can I take the children to play? We just went to the community center or the Orbit, depending on what they're looking to do. So I think it's great, and I think we do have a great response from the community, and I think, partnership between parent groups as well as our community groups, and maybe some of our businesses would be really great.
And our insurance carrier is Maya. A lot of municipalities use Maya. And they have a grant cycle every year, and you can apply for things, and it's safety related. So if the playground was going to be unsafe, you could apply for that, and you might get a portion of it. You won't get the full thing, but you might get 10,000, 12,000. Things, areas like that are always, we look at that before utilizing the local funding, because you do want to take advantage of what's being offered, and that's simple application through them. So when we did that at Central Berkshire, we were approved with every grant we wrote, which was just a one paragraph, this is why we need it. So it's an easy process, and they have it available.
Just seems like that's one of the types of projects that like the facilities director could really help with, and that's like almost in itself pay for jumping at salary, right? So like that's the kinds of things that I'm really hoping that that individual will be able to spearhead for us.
When Morris was built, renovated, added to, the playground was built by parents, and company came in. So the little playground, preschool playground, as well as the bigger playground. Fundraising for that, I think some money may have come from the furnishings money we had at the school, but the PTO raised additional money to make that happen. So I don't remember how much those things I should remember. But
Yeah, I think, athletics booster clubs always are willing to help, and schools, the PTOs are willing to help. So those are all areas that we can look at for some of these projects. Want me to move on to the budget update?
Yep. Sure. Any other questions?
Is this something that you can have a copy of? Yeah. I did too, so thank you.
So we just want to review where we are with the budget at this point in time. We are still developing the 23 budget. We're meeting with the principals, and department meetings are currently in process. We have taken on a line-by-line review of expenditures, and utilizing a 5-year average historical expenditure amount to review and taking out the 2 years that are COVID related and going back to the previous 5 years, because that'll skew it. So we've been doing that and discussing staffing changes and any new initiatives that principals and department chairs may have or want to get going in the next year. That's continuing on. We still have a few more meetings. Hopefully this week we'll get those done. Salaries, all known column movements. We ask employees to tell us before December, do you plan on retiring next year? Will you be able to move a column over after taking courses? So all known column movements and retirements have been accounted for in the salary lines. And those will be updated until we get to the point where we actually deliver the budget to you guys on the 24th. And revenue, state aid has not been released, and that goes directly to the town anyway, but it is a factor in the budget. Entitlement grant allocations are currently being released. Title I did come out, at least with where we are right now and what we can expect. It's not the final number. School choice is another revenue we rely heavily on to offset taxpayer costs in the budget, and we did see a reduction in our revenue in December by 11,000. So we will see that through the spring. So I'm estimating about a 77,000 reduction in school choice money, which will impact what we can use to offset the gross budget and bring it down to a lower number. Circuit breaker reimbursement has increased from 11,000 to 51,000, so there's a little bit of money there. And other revolving funds, which are smaller in nature and really are targeted to areas like athletics or the theater. We will all use a portion of each to offset some of the operating expenses.
And I think a couple of things that I've noticed through our meetings right now is that we're really trying to clean up the budget so it's easier to see and understand where monies go, right? So in a lot of ways, you could think of us philosophically as almost being site-based managed. So curriculum, technology, PD, lots of these items lived at the schools. And so it's really hard to kind of see where the money's flowed. So in some cases, it may make sense for us to take those and, especially now that we have a technology director, for example, and have Randy oversee those. So, so we're trying to clean that up a little bit so that we have a better sense of where those things go, and then being able to prioritize the needs of just kind of letting it go in the back rate. I think the other thing that we're really looking at is trying to really embrace that zero-based approach, but also not just saying, just because we've always done these things in the past, we're going to continue to do them, right? And so we noticed that there was some, I don't know what to call it, but like there was some overages in the budget that have just kind of been historically built in, where people had just kind of always forecasted the same amount for certain projects or for certain items year over year over year. But then when we look at the actual expenditures, they may have fallen well short of what was budgeted. So in those cases, we're going to reduce it so we have a cleaner budget at the beginning, so that we have, I think, a better sense of what the actual costs are in a budget that's built to meet the actual costs based on those historical patterns. So we're not just parking money for the sake of parking.
So we do have some unknowns coming up into this budget year. The negotiations are underway with Unit A, which is the professional staff, the faculty staff, the contract years beginning September 1st. Negotiations will most likely soon begin with Unit D, which is the custodial maintenance staff, and that would begin July 1st. The bus transportation contract has the bid went out. We did receive a response, and we're negotiating with the vendor. So we should have that before the 24th, when we have to have somewhat final numbers in there. And special education needs and services are always changing on a daily basis, Mondays and something's different. So we always monitor that throughout the course of the year and the budget process. So those are all unknowns right now in the budget.
Did you receive one response for your bus transportation bid as you expected?
Yes, just one. So next steps, we want to finalize all the numbers. We want to develop the budget booklet. We, last year, we made an electronic booklet. We're going to continue with an electronic booklet, but we can certainly provide one in print if it's requested. We can do that. And so we will have that for you on the 24th, and we'll give an overview of the presentation of the budget at that time, which is the next school committee meeting on January 31st. Elementary, special ed, admin, and technology budget presentations will occur. February 14th will be the second day.
February 14th is changed to February 7th.
February 7th,
February 7th.
okay. So February 7th will be the secondary budget presentation.
And some people wanted to spend the 14th with their loved ones.
I don't understand that. February 28th is school committee deliberation, and March 14th is the public hearing and the final vote. So that's where we are, and the budget booklet will be ready for the 24th. So this week and next, numbers will be finalized and put together.
And I've used this opportunity to ask a request of my school committee members and not have anybody really dislike me. So when I was realizing, because as we were going through this, I was double checking my dates, and 2/28, I'm gonna be traveling. And I just feel like if we could agree to move 2/28 a week or somewhere, something, then would risk less of a risk that I would get stuck. And if I tell you that I'm traveling back from Hawaii, you might really hate me, so
Hawaii
I'll
again.
just tell you I'm traveling. I left my heart in Hawaii, I didn't go back and get it. So I somehow didn't have that in my calendar, so that's my own fault. We did the whole calendar for the year, so if it's possible for us to shift that date so that we're all on the same page, I would greatly appreciate indulgence.
Well, we could look at March 7th. But I think that was another conflict. that you might have.
Well, I do for the first month, but I've, that also happened with February 7th, so I've got, we're starting a little earlier and kind of moving that one around and trying not to move it too much. I mean, unless anybody wanted to go to March 1st and do it Tuesday, but you've got some have negotiations on Tuesday. Or unless we just move them up and do our next one on the 14th. There's too much of a space between meetings. As we say, official public hearing, we try to have it in enough time for the warrant and everything, but I think we put in there a lot of extra time, don't we? To finalize the
between-
budget.
Yeah, the budget
Like we say,
finalization.
official public hearing, budget vote, March 14th, it's pretty early that we actually
It
need
is.
it, right? But I leave it to you, if you feel like the best thing would be to meet on March 7th, I can try to work my other meeting. And it's my fault, I'm sorry, I just don't want to be unavailable.
Yeah, so we can look at that. We don't have to make that decision tonight. But would that work for other people, the 7th?
I have to read my calendar.
Yeah,
All right, so we could just figure it out later.
because I look at
Thank you.
other
I'm
dates
sorry.
and we do have negotiations on a lot of days and
Yeah,
happens
I'll
that
have
March
to look.
1st is one of those days.
And if you take me with you to Hawaii, I can guarantee I can make the meeting.
Is that a date that you're traveling back?
Yeah, we're doing a direct out of Boston, and so we're gonna fly into Boston. So who knows what could happen in February, Massachusetts.
We haven't had anything happen so far in January, except for the ice storm. Cross country ski team.
You just jinxed us, you know that, right?
I'm sorry.
You just jinxed us.
Oh,
You know.
yeah.
What do they say, the first rule about snow predictions is we don't make snow predictions?
No. I'm a cross country skier.
No, I know,
So-
I'm laughing about when we say, well, we won't have snow past. And then what happens, right?
The next time in the forecast is like 10 days from now, so it's absurd.
Sorry, thank you. We'll
Any
figure it out.
any other
I probably could have been.
comments or questions from Melissa?
Well, so it's a program, a question on the food program, lunch service. That used to be a revolving fund itself. But now I know it's all free, right?
Yes,
How's that working?
It is free for the students, but we are receiving reimbursement for meal served. So we still get the state and the federal reimbursements, even though the meals are free.
As part of COVID relief or something.
Yes, and they'll be free until the end of June unless they extend it again. But that's the date at this point.
Thank you.
That's what they do, that's a great program, to be able to have universal lunch and breakfast.
I was really hoping that it would just stick.
I hope so.
And then if not, maybe there's a conversation there, right? Like, I think there's a lot of collaboration happening across Berkshire County with locally sourced foods, farms, I mean, we can make, I'm not just trying to spend everyone's money, but we can also make a mindful decision about how do we collaborate on food sourcing and covering costs for that, just like we have to figure out how to pay for Chromebooks and pens and, I just feel like in the end, it's a conversation we've had at school committee level for years and years and years and years. And I've also been involved in several organizations that are working on countywide food, farm, distribution, education, and there's just really a lot of fabulous stuff happening. So it doesn't have to be right now, but I think maybe that's part of our, teaching learning culture subcommittee, because I think that there's a lot to be done there. That can free us up. Yes, it may cost a little bit of money, but can free us up to higher quality food service. Richmond's done a lot of work on that as well, and they have some good resources for us to think through those trips,
Okay, moving on.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the conclusion of the superintendent's report. Any other questions or comments? Well, we kind of already gave them the sports update, but again, I'll just reiterate, winter sports, we are in the middle of our winter sports season. Like I said, there's no capacity limits for indoor crowds from either MIAA or DESI. And so, we're proceeding as normal. And probably one of the strangest twists of irony on our snow day last week, we had to cancel skiing because there wasn't enough snow. Can't even make this stuff up, but so some of the skiing has been a little bit backloaded on the season here, but again, sports are off and they're a go. Even tomorrow, when we are closed, our athletes will need to come in for their pool testing so that they can continue to be eligible to play. But again, we've had events. We haven't had any reports of COVID spread that we know of tied back to any of our athletic events or practices. And that kind of thing. So again, we're happy that we're able to offer this for our students to go out there and do other things that we enjoy.
So I just wanted to talk about sports briefly here. I looked at the schedule the other day to see like what game I might go see sometime soon. And I know that MIA must have some thoughtful people out there creating schedules and alignments. But the fact that we're playing, Greenfield, Pioneer, Frontier, that are 2 hours away, we're taking JVs and varsity for hours and hours and hours of time. Seems like MIA hasn't looked at a map of Massachusetts and realized that it's different if you're in Stoughton, Hanover, than it is if you're out here, and the distances traveled seem to me to be absurd. That's really all I wanted to say.
Especially on the school night, right?
On school night, it just can't be good. The JV kids go and they're there playing a game, and then they're there for 2 more hours while the varsity plays, and then there's the bus ride home. And it must be 6 to 7 hours of time.
Yeah, I did hear parents at some of the soccer games in the fall talking about how late some of the students were staying up, particularly to finish, math homework or term papers, because some of the travel that they had to participate in for sports. So we do have a county superintendent's roundtable this week, and again, I can bring that up to our folks and see if we want to make some sort of collective to the MIAA. They did come out earlier and talk to us, they have a new director, but it does seem that this realignment significantly impacts on the kids.
Yeah,
And it's the younger kids now that are in the front of it because the JV team's so young.
right.
And even, and the older kids who also often are managing a lot more responsibility, like we talked about, they've got school applications, they've sometimes got, you know, jobs, they've just got a larger plate of responsibilities anyway, and then having that level of travel, and, you know, we always talk to kids about good sleep hygiene and good, and then we create a system in which it's pretty much impossible, so I've heard a lot of.
Yeah, and that was a frenetic time for
Wow.
kids, yeah, and some kids said, I'm gonna quit sports because I need to focus on, you know, other things, and unfortunately, you know, if they want to do that elective, that's great, but I would hate they have to do that because of the distance, so now they can't, you know, get the grades they want, or, you know, participate in music, or still do Shakespeare, you know, so we wanna make sure that they can be balanced.
Okay, so moving on. Subcommittee meetings. So governance and leadership.
And we met last week, and we are going to be starting in the HMASC to start the policy review, so we gather all materials and having them take a look at that and get it back to us, which is that the process will take up order a couple of years. But will be a big effort for the school committee to update our entire policy manual.
So I noticed that it mentioned that the lady out there had our check for 3,500, and that must be a check that was written 2 or 3 years ago.
Is that right? Is that what you didn't send them?
Didn't you say that in the?
Yeah. Have we issued a payment?
I processed it, I put it through,
Okay,
and I think it may have been on the warrant 2 weeks ago.
okay.
Because it had to be paid this year. That was part of the
Oh,
contract.
So this is not a check from 2 or 3 years ago when we first were talking about the project.
No,
Okay,
no,
That
because
was
it
my
was
concern.
approved.
Yes,
Yes, and I received the paperwork, and the contract said we had to pay 3,500 this year and next year, but they wanted to receive it by a certain date, so I put it through
Okay.
the warrant. It was either, I didn't see it in this warrant that was signed today, so that's why I'm thinking it was 2 weeks ago. And the
Okay.
last one,
that was just my question, was whether that was money from a couple of years ago or current money.
no, it's current.
Human Resources has continued to every other week with the negotiations project. Periodically, occasionally other meetings, but not recently. June morning. And this is now the
Teaching, learning, and
school
school
culture.
culture, I think is what our new name is. And we have a meeting Wednesday, and which time we will then choose a chairperson, if we don't have one yet. We'll meet Wednesday.
And finance met the other day, and we had a conversation about next year's budget. Concerns, I raised several concerns about the fact that offset money, like school choice and other things are declining. And I was concerned also about the things that we put into ESSA that may need to go back into our operating budget, or should go back into our operating budget to be properly placed. And how is this going to impact the 23 budget going forward? And school building committee is meeting, well, we're scheduled to meet tomorrow, but we might push that off to Thursday because of the cold weather and basketball games. Okay, so we have meetings on the 24th, 31st, and 7th, 3 weeks in a row, and those will be lengthy meetings because of the budget. Maybe not the 24th as much as the next two. We'll have the presentations by various departments. So, yeah, that's where our marathon meetings start. So be ready. Be well fed. this point, I guess I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just before we do, I know Bill wants to hiss at me, but I just wanted to make sure to say to Mark and Melissa and the rest of, administration that the work that had to go in during school break, when typically that's a time that most people are able to rest, thinking about how to plan, thinking about how to get everybody back, and it just, it's really, really noticed and really, really appreciated that there's a lot of time, energy, and effort that goes into digesting a significant amount of information before we come back, and always with the idea of how to keep everyone safe as best we can. And I know a lot of complaints come forward that it should have done this way, it should have been done that way, and the reality is it's a yeoman's amount of work to pull that together. And so I want, again, it's also part of your team, but you are the ones here, and so I want to put out the message that I know we all got messages, and I felt comforted and was like, okay, thank you for handling it, and keeping us in the loop, and it just means a lot. And that was your time to rest as well, and so thank you.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and again, all the credit goes to my team. I mean, they really did an amazing job, so I'm fortunate to have them, and thank you for all they did.
Well, it is appreciated and it was noticed, so thanks. Man.
And on that note, we can move to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
This will require a roll call vote.
Or cast.
Bob Munch, aye.
Megan Kirby, aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye.
Veronica Fenton, aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Very good.